Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a name that is quite literally synonymous with global healthcare, Johnson & Johnson. But we aren't just looking at their long history, we are looking at right now. Because 2026 is shaping up to be arguably the most consequential, pivotal year in this company's entire 140-year history. We're talking about the resolution of massive legal battles, absolutely unprecedented revenue milestones, and entirely new frontiers in medical technology. So, if you've ever wanted to see exactly how a legacy healthcare giant completely transforms itself in real time, well, you're in exactly the right place. So here is the roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. Resolving the Talc litigation, 2. Record-breaking financial milestones, 3. A new era of leadership, 4. Entering the robotics market, and 5. Policy agreements and market outlook. Put all of these pieces together and you get a really clear before and after narrative for the company.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, resolving the Talc litigation, clearing the clouds.
Let's start with a massive number, $5.5 billion. In July 2026, Johnson & Johnson announced this proposed settlement to resolve tens of thousands of lawsuits. We're talking about roughly 76,000 claims from people alleging that J&J's baby powder and Talc products caused ovarian cancer. For investors and market watchers, seeing this $5.5 billion figure out there represents a huge, concrete step toward finally wrapping up one of the most expensive and, frankly, damaging legal battles in recent corporate history. Now, how do you actually pay a bill that big? The payout structure is just as critical as the total amount. J&J's plan is to make an initial payment of no more than $3 billion in 2027, with no additional payments kicking in until 2028. But there are 2 really big caveats you need to keep in mind here. First off, plaintiff attorney Chris Seeger, who helped negotiate this deal, has actually suggested that the final payout figure could stretch to $7 billion or more. And second, this whole settlement completely hinges on getting 95% of the remaining claimants to agree to it. So while the framework is absolutely there, crossing the finish line requires overwhelming consensus. What's really crucial here is understanding J&J's legal posture through all of this. Listen to what J&J's VP of Litigation, Eric Haas, had to say. He noted that while the company is confident they would have ultimately prevailed in court, this resolution allows the company to put this matter behind it and remain focused on its mission to develop medicines and devices that save lives. The key takeaway for us, J&J is steadfastly admitting zero wrongdoing. They still firmly maintain that their products are safe and do not contain asbestos. But strategically speaking, they're officially ending their highly controversial and ultimately failed Texas two-step bankruptcy strategy, where they tried to use a shell company to absorb the liability. Now they're just opting to pay up and put the whole thing behind them. Moving right along to Section 2, record-breaking financial milestones, firing on all cylinders. So with that legal cloud starting to lift, look at what the underlying business is doing. In the second quarter of 2026, revenue jumped a highly impressive 6.6% year-over-year, hitting $25.3 billion. They just blew past analyst expectations across the board. The pharmaceutical segment was up nearly 7%, medical technology climbed almost 4%, and they posted an adjusted earnings per share of $2.90. This wasn't just a slight earnings beat, it was a real flex of present-day financial strength. To give some human and strategic context to those numbers, CEO Joaquin Duato attributed this massive success, which, by the way, included $5.5 billion in net earnings for that single quarter alone, to the power of our innovation, the depth of our portfolio, and the momentum in our pipeline. It's a great reminder that underneath all the legal headlines we just talked about, the company's core engine of creating and selling medical solutions is running incredibly hot. Which leads us directly to this, frankly, monumental figure, $101.1 billion. Off the back of that blowout Q2 performance, J&J raised its full year 2026 guidance to this number. And why is this such a big deal? Because if they hit this, Johnson & Johnson will cross the $100 billion annual revenue threshold for the very first time in its 140-year history. It literally puts them in an incredibly rare elite tier of global corporations. That brings us to Section 3, a new era of leadership, passing the torch. You can't steer a $100 billion ship without specialized leadership, and we are seeing a true changing of the guard right now at their innovative medicine division. Jennifer Taubert is retiring after an extraordinary 21-year career. She grew this division to over $60 billion in annual revenue and made Fortune's Most Powerful Women list 10 consecutive times. I mean, talk about a legacy. Stepping into those very large shoes on September 1st, 2026, is Tom Cavanaugh. He brings serious biopharma pedigree to the table, with 30 years in the industry, including a really deep background at Celgene before he joined J&J. This transition is happening at a pivotal moment, right as the company is pushing a massive new wave of product launches. All right, on to Section 4, entering the robotics market, the OTTAVA milestone. Following its FDA de novo authorization in July 2026, a system called OTTAVA is officially stepping into the spotlight. Now, the core technological differentiator here is that it's table integrated. Unlike traditional robotic surgical systems that rely on these massive, bulky carts or big boom-mounted arms, OTTAVA's robotic arms are integrated right into the operating table itself. That saves 30% to 50% of the space in a crowded operating room. If you've ever seen a modern OR, you know that saving half the floor space is an absolute game changer for hospitals. And the FDA isn't just letting them test this out on minor things. OTTAVA is fully authorized for some of the most critical upper abdomen procedures out there. We are talking about gastric bypasses, gallbladder removals, appendectomies, and hiatal hernia repairs. Plus, they are already running a U.S. clinical trial to evaluate the system for inguinal hernia repair, which just so happens to be one of the most common surgeries performed in the entire country. The ambition here is vast, to say the least. But to really understand why J&J is pushing so hard into this space, you have to look at the current market reality. Right now, a company called Intuitive Surgical, with its Da Vinci system, absolutely dominates. They hold an astounding 80% of the robotic surgery market. This is the very definition of a David versus Goliath challenge. For a 140-year-old legacy giant like J&J, grabbing a slice of this pie is absolutely essential if they want to extend their history of surgical leadership into the robotic age. They're starting out with a carefully controlled U.S. launch, but make no mistake, their sights are dead set on chipping away at that massive 80% mountain. Which brings us to our final section, policy agreements and market outlook. Let's look at how J&J is securing its future in Washington. In January 2026, J&J reached a voluntary agreement with the Trump administration. As CEO Joaquin Duato put it, today's agreement shows that when the public and private sectors work together, we can deliver real results for patients and the U.S. economy. To look at the actual mechanics of this impartially, under this agreement, J&J received exemptions from certain tariffs on its pharmaceutical products. In exchange for that, they agreed to participate in the Trump Rx platform, which provides discounted medicines, and they agreed to align their drug pricing with levels found in other developed countries. It's a highly calculated, strategic navigation of federal policy. And that policy strategy connects directly to some absolutely massive domestic capital deployment. J&J has made a $55 billion total commitment to U.S. investments. This isn't just a pledge on paper, it's bricks and mortar right now. They're building a $2 billion biologics facility down in Wilson, North Carolina that is expected to create 5,000 jobs. On top of that, they're pouring over $1 billion into a next-generation cell therapy facility in Pennsylvania. So they are heavily boosting their domestic manufacturing capacity right in tandem with securing those favorable tariff treatments we just discussed. So, what does Wall Street think of all this transformation? Well, they're definitely paying attention. We're seeing a big wave of analyst upgrades following the Q2 results and the OTTAVA approval. Firms like Guggenheim and Freedom Capital have bumped their price targets up to $287 and $280 respectively. In fact, according to S&P Global, the consensus among 23 polled analysts is a solid buy, with an average target of $272.50. Oh, and for the income investors out there, let's not forget J&J's incredible 55-year streak of consecutively raising its dividend. The market is very clearly responding to those talc clouds lifting, the promise of robotic surgery, and that massive pipeline growth. Which brings us to our final thought for today. You've seen the billion-dollar settlements, the record-breaking revenue milestones, the changing of the garden leadership, and this huge leap into cutting-edge robotic surgery. It all paints a picture of a legacy company that is radically transforming itself in 2026. So we leave you with this. With a massive decade-long legal clout finally lifting and entirely new frontiers in the operating room opening up, are this 140-year-old giant's best days actually still ahead of it? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and we will see you next time.